and thank you for this opportunity to come and speak tonight. So I've been out in the world for 10 years now, and it's my turn to report on what's happened. And I'm sorry to say, I still have absolutely no idea what I'm doing or where I'm going. And I'm certain it's the same with all the other adults in the audience. They're just lying to you. We're all just making it up as we go. So I don't have the secret for kicking goals out in the real world. Sorry. However, I have come across something that has worked pretty well for me and a lot of my friends, and it's called curiosity. I'm not just talking about look it up on Wikipedia and call it a day curiosity. I'm talking about pulling on a thread and seeing where it goes, no matter what. Pulling on that thread, and if you think you've gone too far, you've just begun. If the thread doesn't lead you to places no one has ever been before, you're not pulling hard enough. I'm talking about letting your curiosity turn your life completely inside out and upside down. So back in year 9, I started working at a cafe in the Donald Bradman Museum over in Bowra. I did not like coffee at the time, and the coffee at this cafe was awful, terrible, disgusting brown liquid, in retrospect. Yet customers would still come in and they would say, I love the coffee, or they would come back. And I was perplexed, and I started to question, what's going on here? Why are these people coming back? There must be something that I'm missing about coffee. Now that right there was the very first moment, my very first grasp of a thread that I've now been pulling for 14 years. It has taken me to nearly 50 countries, helped me teach millions of people on the internet, and it's pushed me out of bed each morning with the enthusiasm of a kid on Christmas morning. Such is the power of curiosity. Now I said 14 years because my adventure started before I left Oxley. For Year 12 Design and Technology, I made a very primitive espresso machine. It kind of worked, although we weren't allowed to turn it on for the exhibition in case it exploded and killed someone. Now, I worked harder on that than almost any other subject, and this was my first battle between curiosity and reality. I really didn't want to study maths or English, because I could pull on this coffee thread and satisfy my curiosity instead. Now, once the HSC was over, it was apparently time to go to university. I was looking at studying music or industrial design. Music seemed like a little bit of a gamble for me because I was kind of running on luck. And industrial design looked like a glorified 4-year drawing and arts course. And that really wasn't what I wanted. I wanted a 4-year course in designing and building cool stuff. That doesn't really exist. At the same time, I started working in Sydney at one of the best cafes at the time, and I was learning the ropes of truly world-class coffee. I was loving it. 11.5-hour shifts went by in a flash because I was pulling on that thread faster than ever before. But industrial design was still nagging me, so I decided to make a decision the way any self-respecting Australian HSC graduate would on my gap trip to Europe. So I decided I would email 10 industrial designers and 10 coffee roasteries in Scandinavia. And the email was a total cold call out of the blue. And it pretty much said, hello, I'm nobody. Want to hang out? Now after a couple of weeks, I had 10 emails back in my inbox. And all 10 of them were from the coffee people. So they were inviting me to hang out. They were offering to pick me up at the airport, let me stay on their couch. And it was pretty obvious which industry was going to be much more fun, and I think my decision was made even before I left. Now once I returned to Australia, I was incredibly focused. I knew what I had to do. If I was going to make it in this coffee scene, I needed to become the Australian barista champion. So you obviously have no idea how a coffee competition works. There's a barista, that's me, a coffee machine, 4 judges that drink your drinks, and 2 judges that watch everything you're doing intently. You get 15 minutes to make each of those tasting judges an espresso, a cappuccino, and a signature drink of your invention, all the while being impeccably clean and delivering a presentation about your coffee, where it's from, and what it tastes like. Now you do all of that in front of hundreds of people like this, except you're all kind of angry because you don't get to taste any coffee the whole day. Now to do it right, you need months of practice, a lot of equipment, plenty of coffee, patience, and fortitude. But honestly, I learned a lot of what I needed in these coffee competitions from my time at Oxley. Public speaking, mock trial, drama, stage productions, And also, weirdly, engineering, chemistry, and design technology were the perfect set-me-up for coffee competitions. So thank you. On my first crack at coffee competitions, I did something stupid, lost half my points, and was practically disqualified. On my second try, I managed to become the New South Wales champion, moving on to the national rounds, where I subsequently bombed out because my coffee was apparently too acidic. Now, whatever. Everyone at that competition who did well came from Melbourne, down in Victoria, so obviously the thing to do was to move to Melbourne. Fast forward 3 years and 3 jobs at different coffee businesses, and I was the Australian barista champion twice, leading to 3rd and 2nd place in the world. And I'd also snagged 1st place in the world for 2 other competitions, one for brewing coffee without an espresso machine, and one for making coffee cocktails. It turns out I'm kind of competitive. Now, if your curiosity is leading you somewhere, you have an insane advantage. Late nights and incredibly tough challenges are just another step in that journey. Now, when I wasn't preparing for competitions, I was moving up the ranks in the coffee business. Just like any other business, there's a ladder, and I was scaling it as quickly as I could. Not because I was career or money focused, I was honestly just curious, which meant I learnt and retained more, which then in turn made me more valuable for the business. It is a very strong cycle that very quickly led me to becoming one of the co-owners of a coffee company in Melbourne with a roastery, 8 cafes and 250 employees. Now, at that point, I became known as what's a green coffee buyer, which is probably a completely foreign term to all of you. Now, for most aspiring baristas, this is the holy grail of jobs. You get to travel to coffee-producing countries all the time, and they're all tropical. You get to visit farms and choose the best coffees and bring them back to Australia for your coffee business. Sounds like a holiday, right? But actually, it's a really awkward, weird job. Most of your time is on airplanes or bouncing around in 4-wheel drives in rural roads. You get to a tasting lab in the middle of nowhere in a country like Burundi, that's in Africa, and you're completely jet lagged. Obviously, your luggage didn't arrive because Africa, and you kind of stink. On the tables in front of you are hundreds of coffees from this year's harvest, and you need to sample all of them. Now, luckily, in a coffee tasting, you can spit, kind of like wine, but once you've had 50 cups, that doesn't really matter anymore. You need to trust your tongue enough to make a decision at that point that's worth nearly $250,000. 90 days later, the coffee arrives in Australia, and you really hope you didn't screw up. This happens on repeat throughout the year. Now, being a green coffee buyer was obviously the most adventure-filled portion of my career, but I kind of felt detached. I had lost that spark, that curiosity that I was talking about. I knew I needed to get back to the other side of making coffee. So I went hard pulling on that thread for making coffee. I pulled so hard, I ended up building the most popular coffee education website in the world. I started consulting for coffee businesses in every continent. If Mr. Graham, my English teacher, was still here and he knew that millions of people would read my writing, he would be laughing. Now, one day, I started designing my own equipment and tools for making coffee and then selling it to the audience of my website. It felt pretty natural. I was unearthing skills from design tech. I was teaching myself how to design and manufacture stuff on the internet. I was just figuring it out as I went. And then I was following my curiosity until I was shipping thousands of products around the world. And at that point, it hit me. I'm an industrial designer. I didn't have to choose between industrial design and coffee. I just merged them in my own weird way, gaining what I think is the best of both worlds. Now, of course, I'm not saying university isn't a wonderful resource, but the internet also has an incredible wealth of information. And it seems the problem for most isn't a lack of information, it's a lack of motivation. And for me, curiosity was the key. Now, I have one friend who has made a wildly successful international career out of just teaching people how to take and summarize their notes, like a professional highlighter. Another friend of mine designs and manufactures carbon fiber wings, so just the wing, nothing else, for remote control airplanes that are made to break world speed air records. Yet another friend of mine has deep dived so far into chocolate, you thought you loved chocolate, he has gone so far into chocolate that he now co-owns cacao plantations in Thailand. Now I have many more examples. These are normal people that followed their curiosity to the limit. They pulled their own thread. So far, they entered a space no one had found before, and they made it theirs. So, my humble recommendation is to go as far as you possibly can. The deeper you go, the less likely that someone has ever been there before. The more likely you're making completely new discoveries. And because all of you, every single one of you, has a total monopoly on who you are and what you are interested in, there's a fair chance you could be the best in the world. Thank you.